Richard Hart stood in the doorway of the house Evelyn built and watched her leave with 2 suitcases. No apology, no shame, just the calm face of a man who believed paperwork had made him innocent. The porch beneath his shoes was the same porch Evelyn had sanded by hand. The kitchen behind him still carried the tiles she picked. The garden outside was alive because she had saved it, but the court called it his, and Evelyn walked away. 4 days later, she drove deep into the Blue Ridge Mountains and unlocked a cabin Richard never knew existed. Grandma Mabel's cabin. Inside, beneath the old kitchen table, was a loose floorboard Grandma once told her never to fix. Evelyn lifted it. A locked tin box sat underneath. Inside was a blue folder. On the front, in Grandma's handwriting, were 7 words. For the house they may try to take. Evelyn opened it and finally broke down. Not because Richard had won, because Grandma had hidden proof that he never should have. If you believe a woman's years, labor, and sacrifice should count for something, then stay with Evelyn by subscribing, because what Grandma hid in that cabin is the truth too many women never get to prove. To understand why that blue folder shattered Evelyn, we have to go back to the first day she saw Birchwood Lane, long before the court called it Richard's, long before the new lock, long before Evelyn stood in Grandma Mabel's cabin with proof trembling in her hands. It was a wet Thursday afternoon outside Asheville, North Carolina. Rain ran down the windshield in thin silver lines, blurring the old house at the end of the street. The porch leaned slightly. White paint peeled from the siding. Weeds crowded the flower beds like they had been winning for years. Richard did not even turn off the engine. "Evelyn," he said, staring through the glass, "this is not a house. This is a repair bill with windows." But Evelyn had already stopped hearing the rain. She saw the dogwood tree in the side yard, barry, twisted, waiting for spring. She saw the wide front porch, the shape of the upstairs windows, the kitchen facing the back garden. She saw a small room above the stairs where she could put a work table, fabric samples, paint cards, and the quiet parts of herself she had not yet learned to hide. The realtor stood on the porch with a folder over her head. "It needs work," she said as Evelyn climbed the steps. Evelyn touched the old brass doorknob. "That's not always a bad thing." Inside, Richard saw stains on the ceiling. Evelyn saw height. Richard saw warped trim. Evelyn saw craftsmanship. Richard saw a bad investment. Evelyn saw a home that had been neglected, not ruined. Then she stepped into the kitchen. One cabinet door hung crooked. The floor was dull. The windows were cloudy from years of weather and dust. But light still entered that room like it belonged there. Evelyn stood still. Some places do not impress you. They recognize you. That night, Richard said the numbers made no sense. So Evelyn waited until he went to bed and called Grandma Mabel from their small rental duplex. She spread the inspection report across the kitchen table. Beside it were repair estimates, loan figures, and the down payment gap they could not cover. Grandma listened. No interruption, no panics. When Evelyn finished, Grandma asked one question. "Did it feel like yours?" Evelyn closed her eyes. The kitchen light came back. "The dogwood, the upstairs room." "Yes," she whispered. "Then come by tomorrow." The next afternoon, Grandma Mabel handed Evelyn an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. Evelyn stared at it. "Grandma, I can't take this." "You can," Mabel said. "And you will. I don't know when I can pay it back. It is not a loan." Evelyn looked up. Grandma's face was calm, but her eyes were clear in a way that made excuses feel useless. "This is a gift to you, not to Richard, not to the marriage, to you." Evelyn almost smiled. She thought Grandma was being too careful. Mabel did not smile back. "Keep records of what you give, baby. Love may be honest. Paperwork is not always kind." Then she slid a folded note across the table. On the outside, in blue ink, she had written, "For the house that already knows your name." Evelyn kept that note in the second drawer beside the stove after they bought Birchwood Lane, the same drawer that would be empty 27 years later. And that was the first thing Evelyn did not understand. Grandma Mabel had not just helped her buy a house. She had started protecting her from the man who would one day try to take it. At first, Richard did not steal Evelyn's work. He praised it. That was how it began. He stood in the kitchen at Birchwood Lane while she held paint cards against the morning light and told her she had a rare eye. He watched her turn dull rooms into warm ones. He watched guests pause in the entryway, look around, and ask who had made the house feel so alive. In those early years, Evelyn still answered, "I chose the color after seeing how the light moved in here. I found that fixture at an estate sale in Black Mountain. I moved the hydrangeas because the afternoon heat was burning them." Small answers, honest answers. Hers. Then Richard learned to step in before she finished. "We worked hard on it," he would say. Or, "I told Evelyn we needed something warmer." Or, "That was part of the overall plan." The first few times, she barely noticed. Then she noticed and forgave it. Then she noticed and stayed quiet. That was the order of things in their marriage. One evening, Richard hosted 2 real estate clients for dinner. Evelyn spent the whole day preparing the house. She polished the floors, set the table, clipped rosemary from the garden, and placed candles where the dining room shadows fell too sharply. During dessert, one client looked around and said, "Richard, this house is exactly the kind of feeling you should create in your listings." Richard smiled. "That's what I've been trying to teach my team," he said. Evelyn's hand stopped around the coffee pot, not long enough for anyone else to see, but long enough for something inside her to understand. He had not simply accepted a compliment. He had taken a room she made and turned it into proof of his talent. The next week, he brought home photographs from a property near Biltmore Forest. The listing looked cold, expensive, and empty. "Just help me warm it up," he said. "You know, the way you do." Evelyn worked at the kitchen table until almost midnight. She rearranged the brochure, changed the language, softened the colors, created a story around the house so buyers could imagine themselves inside it. Richard presented it Monday morning. By Friday, he had the client. By Saturday, he had the praise. By the next month, he had a new line on his website, Creative Property Positioning by Richard Hart. Evelyn stared at the words on the screen. Her work was there. Her name was not. Richard came up behind her and kissed the top of her head. "Looks professional, doesn't it?" She wanted to say, "That was mine." Instead, she said, "It looks good." That sentence became a door she closed on herself. More work came after that. Listing copy, design boards, client packets, open house layouts, handwritten thank you notes in Richard's voice, only kinder. Evelyn told herself it was partnership. But partnership should leave fingerprints on both sides. This only left his. Grandma Mabel noticed during a visit in late May. The kitchen table was covered with Richard's client materials. Evelyn had been trimming photographs and arranging samples into neat rows. Grandma stood quietly in the doorway, looking at the work before she looked at Evelyn. "Is your name on any of this?" Evelyn kept her eyes on the scissors. "It's for his business." That was not my question. Before Evelyn could answer, Richard walked in, still on the phone. He kissed her cheek without looking at the table. Then he smiled at Grandma. "Keeping her busy," he said. "She likes having something useful to do." Useful. The word landed softly. That made it worse. Grandma did not argue with him. She only watched him leave the room, still talking, still carrying his importance around like a briefcase. After his car pulled out, Grandma reached into her purse. This time, there was no speech, only an old iron key tied with blue thread. She placed it in Evelyn's palm and folded Evelyn's fingers over it. "There is a cabin past Burnsville," she said. "My name is the only name Richard will never think to search." Evelyn looked down at the key. It felt too heavy for what it was. "Grandma, why are you giving me this?" Mabel's face softened. "Because a woman should have one door in this world that no one else controls." Evelyn wanted to laugh. She wanted to say Richard would never do anything that cruel. But the client packet on the table had no trace of her name. And for the first time, the key did not feel dramatic. It felt necessary. Behind her, Richard's papers waited in perfect little stacks. In her hand, Grandma's key pressed cold against her skin, and Evelyn began to understand that disappearing did not always feel like falling. Sometimes, it felt like being useful. The first paper Richard asked Evelyn to sign looked harmless. That was what made it easy. It came on a Tuesday evening in late October. Rain tapped against the kitchen windows. The house smelled faintly of roasted chicken and lemon soap. Evelyn had just finished washing the last plate when Richard walked in with a folder under one arm. "Refinancing papers," he said. Nothing serious. Better rate. Cleaner structure. Evelyn dried her hands on a dish towel. Do I need to read all of it? Richard smiled. Patient. Polished. Tired before she had even asked a real question. You can, he said. But Marston already reviewed it. Marston was his attorney, not theirs. Evelyn knew that. Still, she sat at the kitchen table. Richard opened the folder and turned the pages for her. Here. She signed. Initial here. She initialed. Date here. She dated. Then her pen stopped. One line mentioned title structure. What does this mean? Richard leaned closer. That is just lender language. The house stays with us. This only keeps things clean. Clean. That was one of Richard's favorite words. Clean usually meant simple for him. Evelyn looked at the line again. For one quiet second, Grandma Mabel's warning came back. Paperwork is not always kind. She almost asked more. Then Richard gave a small sigh. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. The kind of sigh that made a woman feel guilty for slowing down her own life. So Evelyn signed. Her name moved across the page. Evelyn Hart. Again. Evelyn Hart. Again. When she finished, Richard gathered the papers before the ink had fully dried. Thank you, he said, kissing her forehead. This helps more than you know. She watched him leave the kitchen with the folder, and for reasons she could not explain yet, the house felt a little less hers. After that night, more papers appeared. Business forms, insurance updates, a home equity adjustment, a correction Richard said should have been fixed years earlier. Each document came with the same calm voice, the same quick explanation, the same quiet pressure to trust him. Then, 3 months before Grandma Mabel died, Evelyn drove to Burnsville. Grandma's little house smelled of peppermint tea and old books. She sat near the window with a blanket over her knees, thinner than before, but still watching the world like nothing could fool her for long. Evelyn tried to talk about ordinary things. The garden, the weather, a new listing Richard was proud of. Grandma let her talk. Then she asked, "Has he put anything in front of you lately?" Evelyn went still. "What do you mean?" "Paper." The room tightened around that word. Evelyn looked down at her hands. "A few things, for the house, for his business. Nothing unusual." Grandma reached beside her chair and opened a small wooden box. Inside were stamps, old receipts, rubber bands, and one folded envelope tied with blue thread. She placed it in Evelyn's hand. "The cabin key is still yours," she said, "but a key may not be enough." Evelyn frowned. "Grandma, what is this? If the papers ever start telling a story you do not recognize, go to the cabin." Evelyn tried to smile. "You're scaring me." "No," Grandma said. "I am trying to leave you less scared later." Then her voice lowered. "Under the kitchen table. Third board from the left. It is loose. Leave it loose." Evelyn stared at her. "What is under it?" Grandma's hand closed over hers. Something Richard cannot explain away. 3 months later, Grandma was gone, and the envelope went into Evelyn's cedar chest. Unopened. For years, Evelyn thought the warning belonged to some faraway future. But Richard had already started building that future, one signature at a time. And when the marriage finally ended, those signatures would speak louder than everything Evelyn had ever done with her hands. The divorce papers arrived on a Monday morning. Evelyn was outside pruning the hydrangeas. Her gloves were damp. Her knees ached. There was dirt under her fingernails. Richard was inside the house on a business call, laughing in that clean, polished voice he used when money was listening. The mail carrier handed Evelyn the certified envelope and looked away too quickly. That was the first sign. Some news arrives before you open it. Evelyn carried the envelope into the kitchen and placed it on the table. Richard came in 15 minutes later. He saw the envelope. Then he saw her face. For 1 second, the man behind the manners showed. Then the manners returned. "I wanted to talk to you before that came," he said. Evelyn looked at him. "No, you wanted it to arrive before I could ask questions." Richard did not answer. That silence did more damage than any confession. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn learned how fast a marriage could become paperwork. The house became an asset. 30 years became account names, payment records, signatures, dates, and legal phrases that sounded harmless until they were used against her. Her attorney, Allison Greer, worked from a narrow office near downtown Asheville. She was calm, careful, and kind, in a way that did not soften the truth. One afternoon, she spread Richard's documents across her desk. Her eyes moved from page to page. Then her expression changed. "Evelyn," she said, "some of these signatures gave him more control than you realized." Evelyn sat very still. "The house?" Allison nodded slowly. "The refinancing helped his position. The equity adjustment helped it more. His lawyer is going to argue that his income carried the home financially." Evelyn's mouth went dry. "I carried that house." "I know." "No," Evelyn said. "I mean, I carried it. I stripped walls. I sanded doors. I paid for materials. I helped his business grow so he could keep paying for all of this." Allison's voice lowered. "I believe you." Then she looked back at the file, and Evelyn understood. Belief was not evidence. The hearing took place on a gray morning in Buncombe County. Richard wore a navy suit. Evelyn wore a black dress she had bought for funerals, never imagining she would wear it to watch her own life be divided. Richard's attorney spoke first. Primary income, documented payments, refinance structure, reasonable settlement. Each phrase sounded clean. Each one moved the house farther from Evelyn. Allison spoke about Evelyn's labor, her design work, her renovations, her role in Richard's business. But the room kept returning to paper. Who signed? Who paid? Who appeared on record? The house on Birchwood Lane sat in the middle of the hearing like a witness with no voice. Evelyn wanted to tell them about the porch, the kitchen light, the dogwood she saved after the roots began to rot. The winter night, she slept in the dining room because the floor stain needed one more coat before morning. But none of that had a line on a legal form. When the final terms came, Evelyn heard them through a strange quiet. Richard would keep the house. Evelyn would receive a limited settlement, enough to survive for a while, not enough to replace a life. Afterward, Allison touched her arm. "If we had clearer proof of the original family contribution," she said, "this could have gone differently." Evelyn nodded. She was too tired to explain that Grandma Mabel had warned her about this long before any lawyer did. Outside, Richard waited near the courthouse steps. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might apologize. Instead, he adjusted his cuff. "I hope we can both move forward with dignity." Dignity. Evelyn looked at him. He did not mean truth. He meant silence. She walked past him without answering. By sunset, she was back at Birchwood Lane, packing what the settlement allowed. 2 suitcases, 1 cedar chest, a few photographs, her old sketchbooks. In the kitchen, she opened the second drawer beside the stove. Grandma Mabel's note was gone. The drawer was not messy. It was empty. The court had taken the house with documents, but someone had taken that note by hand. And for the first time, Evelyn understood. Richard had not started erasing her at the courthouse. He had started long before. The only question was how much he had already made disappear. Evelyn spent her first night away from Birchwood Lane in a borrowed room. A small back bedroom in Weaverville, North Carolina, owned by a woman from church named Nadine Crowell. Nadine had tried to make it kind. Fresh towels on the bed, 1 empty dresser drawer, a lamp left glowing beside the window. But kindness could not make the room hers. Nothing in it knew her. Not the walls, not the quilt, not the narrow closet, not the floor that stayed quiet where Birchwood Lane used to creak. That night, Evelyn woke at 2:13 and reached toward the left side of the bed. At home, her fingers would have touched the old plaster wall. Here, they found empty air. For 1 second, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered, and the remembering hurt worse than waking. Her 2 suitcases stood near the chair. Grandma Mabel's cedar chest sat beneath the window, still locked, still carrying the faint smell of lavender and old wood. Evelyn looked at it in the dark. She had brought it because Richard did not want it. That thought stayed with her longer than it should have. The next morning, Nadine made coffee and tried not to sound worried. "You can stay as long as you need." Evelyn thanked her. Then Nadine said, gently, "At least you got out with something." Evelyn smiled because Nadine meant well, but the word followed her all day. Something. 2 suitcases. A cheddar kest. A shrinking bank account. A car with an overdue service light. If that was something, what had the house been? By the 3rd evening, Evelyn could not sit still. She opened 1 suitcase, then closed it. moved papers from one envelope to another, sorted photographs until one stopped her. It showed Evelyn years earlier, standing in Birchwood Lane's unfinished kitchen. Her hair was pulled back, paint marked her wrist. Behind her, the cabinets had no doors yet. She was smiling, not posing, working. Evelyn turned the photo over. Blank. No date, no note, no proof. Just memory. And memory had already lost once. Near midnight, she knelt in front of Grandma's cedar chest. The key to the chest was still taped beneath the lid, exactly where Mabel used to hide it. Evelyn peeled it loose and opened the lock. Inside were table linens, old sewing patterns, a Bible with worn edges, and holiday cards tied with twine. Then she saw it. A small envelope tucked against the left corner. Blue thread. Evelyn stopped breathing for a moment. The same blue thread Grandma had tied around the cabin key. She lifted the envelope. On the front, in Grandma Mabel's handwriting, were 5 words. When you have nowhere left. Evelyn sat back on her heels. Some messages are heavy before they are opened. Finally, she slid one finger beneath the flap. Inside was the iron key. Dark, cold, heavier than she remembered. Behind it was a hand-drawn map. Past Burnsville. Beyond Cane River. Left where the pavement thins. 3rd gravel road after the old white church. At the bottom, Grandma had written one line. Go before you start believing their version of you. Evelyn read it once. Then again. Outside, a truck passed on the wet road and faded into the dark. For the first time since the hearing, something moved beneath the grief. Not hope. Direction. By dawn, both suitcases were packed again. Nadine found Evelyn at the front door, one hand on the cedar chest, the other closed around the iron key. You sure about this? Evelyn looked toward the pale morning. No, she said. Then she lifted the chest. But I think Grandma was. And somewhere beyond Burnsville, down a road Richard had never seen, a cabin was waiting with a secret Evelyn still did not know how badly she needed. The road to Burnsville did not feel like escape. Not at first. It felt like driving with a question in the passenger seat. Evelyn kept both hands on the wheel as morning opened slowly over the Blue Ridge. Fog sat low in the valleys. The mountains rose behind it in soft gray layers, quiet and patient, like they had seen women leave ruined lives before. The iron key rested in the cup holder. Every few miles, Evelyn looked at it. Not because she thought it would disappear, because some part of her still could not believe Grandma Mabel had left a door waiting. Past Burnsville, the highway narrowed. Stores gave way to barns. Barns gave way to fences. Fences gave way to trees thick enough to swallow sound. Evelyn followed the map carefully. Beyond Cane River, left where the pavement thins. 3rd gravel road after the old white church. The church appeared just after noon, small and weathered, with a cemetery sloping behind it. Evelyn slowed as she passed. The road dipped, curved, then broke into gravel. Her tires cracked over stones. The car climbed between walls of rhododendron and pine. Branches brushed the windows. The cell signal vanished. For the first time in weeks, there was no courthouse, no lawyer's office, no Richard, no house behind a new brass lock. Only the road, only the key. Only Grandma's map trembling slightly on the seat beside her. After nearly 3 miles, the trees opened. The cabin stood in a small clearing. Evelyn stopped the car. For a long moment, she did not move. The cabin was smaller than she expected. Weathered cedar siding, a tin roof darkened by rain, a porch with one railing loose on the left side, 2 front windows clouded with dust. It did not look valuable. It looked hidden. That was different. A narrow creek moved somewhere behind it. Evelyn could hear water running over stone. The sound pulled at something old in her memory, though she could not place it. She stepped out of the car. The mountain air was cooler than Asheville. Damp leaves softened the ground beneath her shoes. The place smelled of pine, moss, and old wood that had survived more winters than anyone had thanked it for. On the porch, Evelyn paused. The boards groaned under her weight, but they held. The lock on the front door was old iron, dark with age. Evelyn slid Grandma's key into it. At first, nothing happened. She turned harder. The lock resisted, then gave. The door opened inward with a long, tired sound. Dust moved in the thin light. Evelyn stood at the threshold. Inside was one main room, a stone fireplace, a narrow bed against the far wall, a rocker near the window, shelves lined with jars, candles, and folded cloth. And there, beneath the south-facing window, was Grandma Mabel's kitchen table. Plain wood, scarred surface, 2 chairs, waiting. Evelyn stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The cabin smelled like cedar, cold ashes, and something faintly sweet, maybe lavender, maybe memory. For the first time since leaving Birchwood Lane, no one was watching her. No one needed her to be polite. No one needed her to be reasonable. She put both suitcases near the door and walked to the table. Her hand passed over the wood. There were small knife marks near one corner. A pale ring from an old cup. A burn mark shaped like a crescent moon. This was not a beautiful table. It was a used one. A kept one. Evelyn sat in one chair and let the silence settle around her. For a few minutes, she thought this was why Grandma had sent her here. A place to breathe. A place Richard could not reach. A place where the walls had never learned his voice. Then her eyes lowered. Beneath the table, the floorboards ran unevenly across the room. Most were tight. One was not. Third board from the left. Evelyn stopped. The words came back exactly as Grandma had spoken them. Under the kitchen table. Third board from the left. It is loose. Leave it loose. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn lowered herself to the floor. Her knees pressed into the dust. Her fingers found the edge of the board. It lifted too easily, as if it had been waiting for her hand. Beneath it was a shallow space lined with old newspaper. And inside that space, wrapped in oilcloth, was a locked tin box. Evelyn reached for it slowly. The iron key in her coat pocket felt suddenly heavier. Because whatever Grandma Mabel had hidden here, she had not hidden it for the cabin. She had hidden it for the day Evelyn would finally come looking. The tin box opened with a sound Evelyn felt in her chest. A small click. A small release. Then nothing moved. Not the dust. Not the light. Not Evelyn. For a moment, she only stared at what Grandma Mabel had hidden beneath the cabin floor. There was no jewelry inside. No stack of cash. No sentimental bundle tied with ribbon. Just a blue folder, faded at the corners, tied with white string. Across the front, in Grandma's handwriting, were 7 words. For the house they may try to take. Evelyn's hand went still. Not because she understood everything, because one part of her did. She untied the string. The first page was a letter. Grandma's handwriting was slower than Evelyn remembered, but still firm. My Evelyn, if you are reading this, someone has made you feel like the life you built can be taken because your name was not placed where it should have been. Evelyn sat down. The chair scraped softly against the floor. She kept reading. I could not make you see Richard before you were ready. A woman has to wake up in her own time. But I could keep records. I could keep proof. I could keep something safe for the day memory would not be enough. Evelyn lowered the page. Memory would not be enough. That was exactly what the court had taught her. She opened the folder wider. The first document was a copy of the cashier's check Grandma Mabel had given her for the down payment on Birchwood Lane. The memo line was clear. Gift to Evelyn Hart for purchase of residence. Separate family contribution. Evelyn read it twice, then a third time. Not because the words were difficult, because for months, Richard's version of the house had sounded official. Now Grandma's version had a bank stamp. Behind it were transfer records, copies of old deposit slips, a receipt from the closing attorney. Then, a notarized statement dated 27 years earlier. Grandma's signature sat at the bottom. So did a witness signature. Evelyn read the first paragraph slowly. The funds provided to my granddaughter, Evelyn Hart, are a personal family gift intended solely for her contribution toward the purchase and protection of the property known as Birchwood Lane. The room blurred. Evelyn placed one palm flat on the table. She needed something solid. There was more. Receipts for tile, lumber, paint, porch railings, garden drainage. Several were in Evelyn's name. Others had notes in Grandma's handwriting. Paid from Evelyn's personal account. Kitchen restoration. Front porch repair. Materials selected and purchased by Evelyn. Then came the photographs. Evelyn in old jeans beside a stack of floorboards. Evelyn standing in the unfinished kitchen, hair tied back, paint on her wrist. Evelyn kneeling in the garden with mud on her knees and Grandma Mabel standing behind her, smiling like she already knew history would need a witness. On the back of one photo, Grandma had written, "This is the day she began making the house live again." Evelyn pressed the photo against the table. That was when she broke. Not loudly, not beautifully. Her shoulders folded, her breath caught, and the grief she had carried so carefully since the courthouse finally slipped out of her hands. She cried because Grandma had believed her before there was a case. She cried because the house had not imagined her. She cried because someone had known that a woman's labor could be stolen twice, first by a man, then by the record he controlled. At the bottom of the folder was one final page, a list. 20 names, phone numbers, addresses, old contractors, a former closing assistant, a neighbor from Birchwood Lane, a retired bookkeeper from Richard's office. At the top, Grandma had written, "People who saw what you did." Evelyn wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. That list changed the room. The cashier's check proved money. The receipts proved labor. The notarized statement proved intent. But the names meant she might not have to stand alone. Evelyn looked around the cabin. The old table, the dust, the loose floorboard, the tin box. Grandma had not built a hiding place. She had built a waiting room for the truth. Evelyn reached for her phone. No signal. The screen showed nothing. She almost laughed through what was left of her crying. Of course, there was no signal. Not here. Not yet. So she gathered every page with both hands and placed them back in the blue folder, carefully, like they were alive. Then she held the folder against her chest and looked toward the cabin door. The documents did not give her Birchwood Lane back. Not by themselves. And the court had already spoken once. But for the first time, Evelyn had something Richard had never expected her to have. Proof with dates. Proof with names. Proof with a witness who had been gone for years and still knew exactly where to speak from. By morning, Evelyn would have to leave the mountain long enough to find a signal. She would have to call Allison Greer. She would have to ask the question that suddenly mattered more than fear. Could the truth still count after the wrong story had already won? Evelyn left the cabin just after sunrise. Not because she wanted to leave, because truth still needed a phone signal. The blue folder sat on the passenger seat, covered with her sweater. She had not slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Grandma Mabel's handwriting. "For the house they may try to take." At the old white church near the main road, her phone caught 2 bars. Evelyn pulled into the gravel lot. For a moment, she only stared at Allison Greer's name on the screen. Then she called. Allison answered on the 4th ring. "Evelyn, I found something." "What kind of something?" Evelyn looked at the folder. "Proof." That word changed the silence. Allison did not rush her. Evelyn read the details one by one. The cashier's check, the bank stamp, the notarized statement, the receipts, the photographs, the witness list. When Evelyn finished, she could hear wind moving through the churchyard grass. Allison spoke carefully. "Read me the date on the notarized statement again." Evelyn did. "And the check was made to you personally?" "Yes." "Not to Richard?" "No." "Not to both of you?" "No, to me." Allison went quiet. Then her voice sharpened. "Evelyn, this does not hand you the house back today. I know, but it changes the conversation." Evelyn closed her eyes. A conversation was more than she had yesterday. Allison gave instructions fast. "Do not call Richard. Do not text him. Do not tell anyone connected to Birchwood Lane. Photograph every page. Make copies. Keep the originals safe. And, Evelyn, until I see them, that folder does not leave your hands." By noon, Evelyn sat at the copy machine of a small office supply store in Burnsville. The clerk, a young woman named Tessa, handled the pages carefully. No question, no gossip, just quiet attention. The scanner light passed over Grandma's letter. Then the check. Then the photo of Evelyn in the unfinished kitchen, paint on her wrist, cabinets still bare behind her. Tessa paused. "Is that you?" Evelyn looked down. "Yes." "You looked happy." Evelyn had no answer for that. She had remembered the work. She had remembered the loss. She had forgotten the happiness. Back at the cabin, she spread the copies across Grandma's kitchen table and opened a notebook. For the first time in years, the columns were not for Richard's business. They were for her. Name, number, what they saw, what they might still have. The first call went to Glenn Satterfield, a retired carpenter from Black Mountain. At first, he did not place her. Then Evelyn mentioned Birchwood Lane, the porch railing, the kitchen window trim, the dogwood tree. Glenn went quiet. "Oh," he said. "You're the wife who knew the measurements." Evelyn's pen stopped. He continued. "Your husband talked more, but you were the one who knew the house." Evelyn pressed the phone closer. "Do you have any old records?" "Maybe. Boxed somewhere." Then he paused. "But I remember this. He asked me to put the final invoice under his name. Said it kept things clean." Evelyn wrote one word. Clean. The same word Richard had used for years. Before she could call the next name, her phone lit up. Richard. Evelyn stared at the screen. Allison had not contacted him yet. No one was supposed to know. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then stopped. A voicemail appeared. Evelyn sat in the darkening cabin, the blue folder open beside her. Richard had found out too soon, and now the question was no longer whether the proof mattered. It was who had warned him. Evelyn did not play Richard's voicemail right away. She let the phone sit beside the blue folder on Grandma Mabel's kitchen table. Outside, the cabin windows had gone dark. Inside, one word sat alone in her notebook. Clean. Glenn Satterfield had said Richard used that word when he asked for the invoice under his own name. Richard had used the same word for refinancing, for business forms, for every paper that made Evelyn smaller. At last, she pressed play. Richard's voice filled the cabin. "Evelyn, I heard you've been calling people about Birchwood Lane." Her hand tightened around the phone. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he continued, "but the settlement is final. I would hate to see you waste what little money you have chasing false hope." Then his voice softened. That familiar softness, the one that always came before a door closed. "I'm saying this because I care. Be careful." The message ended. Evelyn sat still, not frightened, alert. Richard had reacted too fast. Allison had not contacted his lawyer yet. Glenn had no reason to call Richard. The copy store clerk did not know the story, so someone had warned him. Evelyn called Allison. This time, her hands stayed steady. Allison listened to the message twice. "Save it," she said. "You think it matters?" "I think men who feel safe do not leave warnings this early." That line stayed with Evelyn. Men who feel safe do not warn this early. Allison told her to keep calling Grandma's list. Say less. Ask for records. Collect names. Do not mention the folder. "Let Richard wonder how much you know," Allison said. By morning, Evelyn called the next number. Willa Crane, a retired closing assistant near Marion, remembered Grandma Mabel immediately. "She asked for copies of everything," Willa said. Evelyn leaned over the table. "Everything?" "The gift letter, the check receipt, closing packet, anything tied to your name." Evelyn looked at the blue folder. Grandma had not been guessing. She had been preparing from the start. The next call went to Beverly Rusk, an old neighbor from Birchwood Lane. Beverly remembered the work. Not vaguely, clearly. "You were always outside with tools," she said. Richard came home late, parked, and walked in like the house had fixed itself. Evelyn almost smiled. Beverly still had photographs from a block party. She promised to look. By noon, the notebook had new dates, new names, and a pattern Richard had never expected. People remembered. Not perfectly, but enough. That afternoon, Allison called back. "I spoke with Richard's attorney." Evelyn stood by the window. "And?" "He called your claim emotional and unsupported." Evelyn looked at the folder. "That was before you told him?" "Yes." "And after?" Allison paused. "After I mentioned the dated statement, bank records, cashier's check, and witnesses, his tone changed. The cabin seemed quieter." "What now?" Evelyn asked. "I'm sending a formal demand letter. Not accusations. Questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind Richard will not want to answer on record." Evelyn looked down at the table. Grandma's letter, the check, the statement, the receipts, the witness list. Richard's voicemail. For the first time, it did not look like scattered proof. It looked like a case. That evening, Evelyn copied Richard's voicemail into her notebook word for word. She was halfway through the final line when headlights moved across the cabin wall. She froze. One vehicle was climbing the gravel road. Slowly. Too slowly to be lost. The headlights stopped at the edge of the clearing. A black SUV. Richard's SUV. Evelyn rose without turning on a light. Through the window, she watched him step out and look around the cabin clearing. Not worried. Not sorry. Measuring. The way he used to look at houses he planned to control. He did not know the originals were already copied. He did not know Allison had the voicemail. He did not know Grandma's folder was lying open on the table behind Evelyn. But he knew enough to come. And that meant the truth inside this cabin had finally reached the man it was meant to expose. Richard did not knock. He stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at Grandma Mabel's cabin like it had no right to be there. Inside, Evelyn stood beside the kitchen table. The blue folder was open behind her. Richard's voicemail sat copied in her notebook, every word written down. For 30 years, she had known that look on his face. He wore it at open houses, at closing tables, in front of properties he wanted. It was not regret. It was calculation. Evelyn did not step outside. She did not explain. She did not give him the old version of herself, the one who rushed to make his discomfort smaller. After a minute, Richard turned back to his SUV and drove away. Only then did Evelyn breathe. He had not come to apologize. He had come to measure the threat. The next morning, Allison Greer sent the demand letter. It was not emotional. That was its power. It named the cashier's check, the notarized statement, the bank records, the invoices, the witnesses, the voicemail. Then it asked the questions Richard did not want placed on paper. Why was Grandma Mabel's separate gift not properly disclosed? Why were Evelyn's renovation expenses buried under Richard's name? Why did Richard contact her after learning she was gathering records? Why did he appear at a private cabin never listed in the divorce? Question, not accusations. Questions with proof standing behind them. For 2 weeks, Richard said nothing to Evelyn. Then his attorney requested a private settlement meeting. Allison called her on a Thursday afternoon. They want this resolved quietly. Evelyn was standing on the cabin porch, watching mist lift through the trees. Quietly, she said. Yes, that used to be how he won. Allison paused. This time, quiet does not mean empty. The meeting happened in Asheville, in a conference room with gray carpet, glass walls, and a table polished so brightly it reflected everyone's hands. Richard arrived in a navy suit. Same careful posture. Same controlled face. Same clean shave. But something had shifted. His confidence no longer filled the room before he did. His attorney spoke first. He called the situation unfortunate. He called the documents unexpected. He said nobody wanted to reopen painful history. Evelyn listened. Allison listened. Then Allison opened the blue folder. The room changed. Richard looked at it the way a man looks at a locked door from the wrong side. The first offer was low. Allison rejected it. The second offer was better. Still not enough. Then Allison placed one photograph on the table. Evelyn in the unfinished kitchen at Birchwood Lane. Paint on her wrist. Cabinets bare behind her. Light coming through the windows she had refused to replace. On the back, Grandma Mabel had written, "This is the day she began making the house live again." Richard looked at the photo. For once, he had no ready sentence. Evelyn spoke then, quietly, "I am not here because I want the old house back." Richard looked up. "I love that house," she said. "I built much of what made it valuable. You know that. I know that. And now the record is going to know it too." His mouth tightened, but he stayed silent. "You spent years letting me disappear from my own work," Evelyn said. "I am not asking you to become honest because it is noble. I am asking because the proof no longer gives you another choice." No one moved. Outside the glass wall, people walked through the hallway carrying coffee and folders, living ordinary mornings. Inside that room, 30 years of silence finally met paper. The final settlement came 1 week later. It did not give Evelyn every year back. No document could do that. It did not return the nights she worked while Richard collected praise. It did not restore the younger woman who once believed love would protect the truth. But it did three things that mattered. It compensated her for Grandma Mabel's separate family gift. It compensated her for documented restoration costs and value added to Birchwood Lane. And it placed one sentence into the legal record that Richard could not soften or explain away. Evelyn Hart made substantial documented contributions to the acquisition, restoration, and increased value of the Birchwood Lane property. Evelyn read that sentence 3 times. Not because it healed everything, because it existed. Her name, her work, on the record. Richard signed first. Evelyn signed after him. Her hand did not shake. After the money came through, people expected her to want Birchwood Lane back. Nadine asked gently. Allison asked carefully. Even Beverly Rusk wondered if Evelyn wanted to walk through that front door again and reclaim the rooms Richard had kept. Evelyn thought about it. Then one afternoon, she drove past the house. The dogwood was blooming. The porch looked freshly painted. The new brass lock still caught the sun. Pain rose in her chest, then settled. Not gone, but no longer driving. Birchwood Lane had been hers once. Then it became the place where she disappeared. She did not want to win her way back into a room that had taught her to vanish. So she kept driving, back to the mountain. The cabin needed work, real work. The roof needed patching. The porch needed leveling. The kitchen window stuck halfway. The old stove had to go. Evelyn used the settlement carefully, not to make the cabin grand, to make it livable, warm, strong. Hers. She hired help when she needed it, learned what she could, sanded Grandma's kitchen table and left its scars visible, framed Grandma's letter near the south-facing window, placed the blue folder in a fireproof box, not hidden now, protected. By winter, the cabin had heat. By spring, it had a studio, a long table under the window, shelves for fabric, paint, old tools and new sketches, a wall where Evelyn pinned plans for restoration projects around the county. People began calling, a neighbor first, then a shop owner in Burnsville, then a couple restoring an old farmhouse near Spruce Pine. They did not call Richard. They called Evelyn. One morning, almost a year after she left Birchwood Lane, Evelyn stood inside the cabin with coffee in her hand. Sunlight crossed the floor where she had once knelt and found the box. Fresh curtains moved softly at the window. Firewood sat stacked by the door. Grandma Mabel's photograph rested on the shelf. Nothing about the cabin looked rich, but everything about it looked claimed. Richard kept Birchwood Lane for a while, but he did not keep the truth. He did not keep Evelyn's name off the record. He did not get the final sentence, and he did not get to decide what her life was worth. Evelyn did not return to the house that forgot her. She built a new life in the place that remembered her first. If Evelyn's story stayed with you, give this video a like so more people can find it. And if you believe years of labor, love, and sacrifice should not be erased in silence, stay with this channel by subscribing. Then tell me in the comments, what part of Evelyn's comeback hit you hardest? Grandma's hidden proof, Richard finally facing the record, or Evelyn choosing peace over the house he took?